Chosen One, this is not a coincidence. The moment you clicked on this video, the source registered your presence. Something seismic has shifted in the invisible architecture surrounding your existence, and whether you fully comprehend it or not, you have crossed a threshold that the universe itself has been holding open for you, not for days or months, but possibly for lifetimes. There exists right now in dimensions beyond ordinary perception, a recognition event taking place. Ancient protocols that have governed your journey are being rewritten in real time. You have done something, perhaps quietly, perhaps without fanfare, perhaps in a moment you didn't even recognize as significant, but the reverberations are undeniable. The source, that infinite intelligence orchestrating all of creation, has been observing you with patience that defies human measurement. And now that patience has transformed into something else entirely. Authorization. The restraints have been lifted. The watchers have gone silent. Your enemies have been caught off guard. Everything you have endured, every inexplicable delay, every crushing loss, every moment you felt abandoned, it was preparation. And now, the preparation phase is over. What comes next will test everything you think you know about yourself and reality. Chosen One, like this video, subscribe, and comment, "I am ready," for a powerful surprise. Chapter 1. The Authorization Event. When the source finally gave the order. The universe operates on permissions you were never taught about in any spiritual teaching or religious doctrine. These permissions are not metaphorical constructs designed to make you feel better about your struggles. They are actual operational protocols embedded in the fabric of reality itself, governing what can and cannot unfold in your personal timeline. For reasons that transcend ordinary understanding, your journey has been operating under a specific set of restrictions, invisible boundaries that limited not your potential, but the timing of its expression. These restrictions were not punishments. They were not tests of faith, designed by a capricious deity playing games with your suffering. They were calibration mechanisms, ensuring that when you finally moved, the movement would occur at precisely the right intersection of cosmic conditions. The source does not operate on human schedules. It does not respond to your impatience, your prayers for acceleration, or your desperate bargaining in moments of crisis. The source operates on readiness, not your perception of readiness, but actual operational readiness that factors in variables you cannot see and consequences you cannot predict. When you took that action, whatever it was in your specific situation, a recognition signal was transmitted through channels that exist outside linear time. This was not a reward for good behavior. This was not the universe finally noticing you after ignoring you for years. This was the fulfillment of a condition that had to be met before certain doors could open. The condition was not moral purity. It was not spiritual perfection, or the completion of some arbitrary checklist of enlightenment milestones. The condition was the demonstration, under pressure, that you had reached a specific level of internal sovereignty. You made a choice without the guarantee of success. You moved without seeing the full staircase. You committed to a direction when every external indicator suggested you should wait, retreat, or seek more information. And in that moment of choice, something in the invisible architecture recognized that you were no longer operating from the consciousness that required protection from your own power. The restriction that lifted was ancient, older than language, older than human civilization, older than the current iteration of this planet's history. It existed as a safeguard, preventing premature activation of abilities and opportunities that would have destroyed you if accessed too early. Think of it like security clearance in classified military operations. No matter how capable a soldier might be, certain information and certain weapons remain locked until that soldier demonstrates not just skill, but judgment under fire, the capacity to make decisions when death is a real possibility, and the psychological stability to handle knowledge that changes everything. Your entire life up until this point has been that demonstration. Every betrayal taught you discernment. Every failure taught you resilience. Every loss taught you detachment. Every moment of isolation taught you self-sufficiency. These were not random sufferings inflicted by an indifferent cosmos. These were specific training protocols designed to forge something that could survive what comes next. The moment the authorization came through, observers throughout multiple dimensions registered the event. Some of these observers exist in physical form on this planet, walking among humanity with specific assignments to monitor awakening souls. Others exist in purely energetic states, functioning as record keepers and system administrators for the larger spiritual architecture governing Earth's evolution. When your authorization processed, they all received the same notification. This one is no longer in the preliminary phase. The nature of their observation changed instantly. Before, they were watching to see if you would make it. Now, they are watching to see what you will do with the clearance. Before, intervention was possible if you veered too far off course. Now, intervention is prohibited. You are operating in a new jurisdiction where free will is not just respected, it is absolute. This is why certain things that used to work for you have stopped working. This is why certain people who used to provide guidance have gone quiet or disappeared from your life entirely. This is why you have been feeling a strange mixture of emptiness and intensity, as if something has been removed while simultaneously something else has been activated. The removal was the safety mechanisms. The activation is your actual operating system coming fully online without the governors and limiters that were previously in place. Most people never reach this point. Most spiritual seekers spend entire lifetimes cycling through the same lessons, never demonstrating the readiness required for authorization. They pray for breakthrough, while simultaneously clutching the very patterns that prevent breakthrough. They beg for transformation, while refusing to make the choices that would initiate transformation. They want the power without the cost, the glory without the sacrifice, the recognition without the responsibility. You are different, and the Source knows this not because of what you said, but because of what you did when everything inside you was screaming to do the opposite. The authorization was not given because you are special in some ego-gratifying way. It was given because you fulfilled a specific function under specific conditions, proving that the investment of energy and attention into your development was not wasted. From this moment forward, consequences accelerate. Doors that were locked will open, but they will open quickly and without warning. Opportunities will present themselves, but they will not wait for you to feel ready. Challenges will emerge, but they will be challenges you are equipped to handle, even if you do not feel equipped. The timeline has shifted from preparation to execution, from potential to manifestation, from theory to practice. There is no going back from this point. The old life, the old identity, the old patterns, they are not available to you anymore, even if you try to return to them. The authorization event is irreversible. Reality itself has been restructured around you, and that restructuring is permanent. The Source has given the order. The order was not a suggestion. It was not an invitation to consider a new possibility. It was a command transmitted into the operating system of your existence. Proceed. Chapter 2. The Watcher's Silence. Why the Overseers Stopped Interfering. There are entities assigned to you that you have never seen with physical eyes, presences that have tracked your every deviation from the expected path since before you have conscious memory. These are not angels in the religious sense, nor are they demons attempting to corrupt you. They are functionaries, consciousness-based administrators with specific assignments in the larger system of spiritual evolution that governs this planetary experience. Their role, for the entirety of your journey until now, was not protection in the way you might imagine. They were not guardian angels intervening to save you from danger. They were data collectors, measuring your responses to pressure, cataloging your choices under stress, monitoring the development of your consciousness as it moved through designed experiences. Every time you faced a decision point, they recorded what you chose. Every time you encountered trauma, they measured how long it took you to process and integrate. Every time you were betrayed, abandoned, or attacked, they documented whether you collapsed into victimhood or transmuted the experience into wisdom. Their observation was clinical, not emotional. They did not feel sorry for you when you suffered. They did not celebrate when you succeeded. They simply recorded data and transmitted reports to higher levels of the administrative structure. You were, in their system, an ongoing experiment, not in a cruel sense, but in an evaluative sense. The question they were assigned to answer was simple. Can this one handle what we need them to handle? Will this consciousness fragment under pressure, or will it compress into something denser, stronger, more capable? The human experience is designed to answer these questions. Earth itself functions as a testing ground, a pressure chamber where souls are subjected to conditions that reveal their true operational capacity. Most fail the testing. Most souls incarnate here, go through a few lifetimes of struggling with basic lessons, and then depart without ever approaching the level of development required for authorization. But you kept going. Even when it made no logical sense to continue, you continued. Even when hope was absent, you persisted. Even when every external reward was stripped away, you refused to abandon the path. This persistence was not willpower in the conventional sense. It was something deeper, a function of your essential nature that the Watchers were specifically monitoring. They needed to know if your commitment to growth was conditional or absolute. If it was conditional, you would have broken when the conditions became intolerable. If it was absolute, you would endure regardless of conditions. The moment you crossed the threshold with your recent action, their instruments registered a specific reading. You exceeded expected variance without fracturing. This is the technical way of describing what happened. You went further than their models predicted you could go, and you did it without losing structural integrity. Your consciousness did not shatter. Your identity did not fragment. Your core remained stable, even as everything around it collapsed. This reading terminated their assignment. Their jurisdiction ended the instant you exceeded the expected variance, because their role was measurement of potential, not management of actualization. Once potential converts to actuality, a different set of protocols takes over. The Watchers went silent, not because they abandoned you, but because you graduated from their level of observation. You are no longer experimental. You are now operational. The difference is profound. Experimental subjects are monitored closely, with safeguards in place to prevent catastrophic failure. Operational assets are given autonomy, with the understanding that they will either succeed or fail based on their own choices, and either outcome provides valuable data for the system. The silence you have been feeling. That eerie absence of the guidance, synchronicities, and subtle interventions that used to appear when you needed them is evidence of this transition. You are now operating in a domain where help does not arrive automatically. You have been deemed capable of navigating without training wheels, without safety nets, without the invisible hands that used to steady you when you stumbled. This feels terrifying to the part of you that has grown accustomed to subtle support. But it is actually the greatest vote of confidence the system can give. You are no longer being helped because you no longer need help in the way you once did. The assistance you require now is of a different nature entirely, and it operates on protocols you have not yet learned to recognize. What happens next in your journey is no longer being observed as potential outcome. It is being recorded as established fact. The Watchers have already filed their reports. Their conclusion, transmitted up through hierarchies of spiritual administration, was definitive. This one is ready. In the invisible ledgers where souls are tracked and developmental progress is documented, your status has changed. The notation in your file no longer reads under observation pending outcome. It now reads cleared for advanced operations, monitoring reduced to archival function only. This means that unless you do something catastrophically off course, the Watchers will not interfere with your choices. They will not send warning signs. They will not create obstacles to prevent you from making mistakes. They will not arrange synchronistic meetings with people designed to redirect your path. All of that infrastructure has been removed. You are flying solo now, with the full weight of consequence attached to every decision you make. The training phase, where mistakes were cushioned and failures were educational experiences with minimal lasting impact, is over. You are in the execution phase, where mistakes create real damage and failures have permanent consequences. This is not meant to frighten you. This is meant to awaken you to the magnitude of what has shifted. The universe does not remove support systems from people who still need them. The fact that the Watchers have gone silent is proof, absolute proof, that you have developed the internal capacity to navigate without their constant monitoring. You have earned the silence. You have earned the autonomy. You have earned the terrifying freedom of operating beyond the safety protocols that govern developing souls. The silence is not abandonment. The silence is respect. The silence is recognition that you have become something that no longer requires the kind of oversight that defines the journey of the unready. Chapter 3. The Enemy's Misfiled Profile. How opposing forces misjudged you. In the invisible war that rages around every awakening soul, intelligence is everything. Forces that oppose the evolution of consciousness, whether you conceptualize them as demonic entities, archonic systems, or simply the gravitational pull of collective unconsciousness, rely heavily on profiling. They cannot attack every awakening individual with maximum force because their resources, while vast, are not infinite. They must prioritize threats, allocate attention strategically, and deploy countermeasures based on assessed danger levels. Every soul on a developmental path is assigned a threat classification in their systems, a rating that determines how much energy will be directed toward neutralizing that individual's potential. The classification is based on observable patterns, how quickly someone progresses through spiritual lessons, how resistant they are to distraction and corruption, how much influence they might have on others if they fully activate, and how likely they are to actually complete their mission rather than give up halfway through. Your file in these adversarial systems contained a critical error. For reasons that are only now becoming clear, you were classified as dormant far longer than you should have been. The opposition looked at your external circumstances, your struggles, your setbacks, your apparent lack of progress, and concluded that you were not a priority threat. They saw someone spinning their wheels, someone trapped in repetitive patterns, someone who appeared to be going nowhere despite sporadic bursts of effort. What they failed to recognize was that your delays were not weakness. Your delays were calibration. Every time you paused, every time you seemed to retreat back into old patterns, every time you appeared to be failing the same tests repeatedly, you were actually integrating lessons at depths that do not show up in surface behavior. You were building internal architecture that would allow you to handle power without being corrupted by it. You were developing discernment that would protect you from deception. You were forging resilience that would prevent you from shattering when the real pressure came. The opposition mistook all of this for stagnation. Their analysts, reviewing your case periodically, kept filing reports that said essentially the same thing. This one is not a concern. Maintain passive monitoring, but do not allocate active countermeasure resources. This assessment was reinforced every time you fell back into old behaviors, every time you made choices that looked like spiritual regression, every time you engaged with lower frequency patterns that suggested you were not actually growing. What they did not understand, what they could not understand because their intelligence systems are sophisticated but not omniscient, was that you were playing a longer game than they anticipated. You were allowing yourself to look weak while quietly becoming strong. You were permitting yourself to appear lost while secretly finding your way. You were letting them believe you were neutralized while actually preparing for a move they never saw coming. When you finally acted, when you crossed the threshold that triggered the authorization event, their systems were caught completely unprepared. The countermeasures they had in place for you, the specific attacks, distractions, and psychological operations designed to keep you contained, were all calibrated for the person you used to be. They were prepared to deal with your old fears, your old triggers, your old weaknesses. But you are not that person anymore. The growth that happened beneath the surface, invisible to their monitoring systems, has transformed you into something their existing strategies cannot effectively target. They responded too late, with the wrong weapons, to a version of you that no longer exists. This is a catastrophic intelligence failure in their operation, and the reverberations of this failure are creating chaos in their ranks right now. Entities that were assigned to manage your containment are being reassigned. Their failure to accurately assess your threat level, noted in whatever equivalent of performance reviews, exists in those dimensions. Resources that could have been deployed to stop you when you were more vulnerable are now being scrambled in emergency response, trying to adapt to a situation that is already spiraling beyond their control. The problem they face is that you moved during a window when they believed you were dormant. You struck from a position of apparent weakness, which is the most devastating form of strategic surprise. In human warfare, the greatest victories come from attacks launched when the enemy believes you are incapable of attacking. You have just delivered that kind of victory in the spiritual war, and the opposition is now operating in reactive mode instead of proactive mode. This does not mean you are safe. This does not mean the opposition will give up or retreat. What it means is that they have lost the initiative. For a period of time, how long depends on factors too complex to predict. You will be operating inside a window where their response to you is disorganized, confused, and based on outdated intelligence. This is your operational advantage. This is the window during which you must move quickly, decisively, and without hesitation, because eventually they will update your file, reassess your threat level, and deploy countermeasures designed for who you have become rather than who you used to be. The fact that they misjudged you is not a permanent condition. It is a temporary advantage that must be exploited before they recalibrate. The miscalculation will be studied in whatever strategic analysis occurs among oppositional forces. Your case will become an example of why dormancy should never be assumed, why surface-level behavior is not a reliable indicator of actual development, and why threat assessment must account for hidden variables that do not show up in conventional monitoring. They will learn from their mistake. They will update their protocols. They will ensure that future cases similar to yours are not underestimated. But that learning process takes time, and during that time, you have room to maneuver that most awakening souls never get. Use it. Use it ruthlessly. Use it without guilt or hesitation. The universe handed you a strategic advantage that cannot be purchased, cannot be earned through good behavior, and cannot be given by any guru or spiritual teacher. The universe handed you the advantage of being underestimated, and that advantage is only valuable if you act before they realize their error. Chapter 4. The Bloodline Signal: Why Your Ancestral Chain Reacted. You are not the first in your lineage to walk this path, and the action you completed was not an isolated individual achievement. It was the culmination of a process that began generations before you were born. A process involving people whose names you may never know and whose struggles never made it into family stories. Your bloodline carries memory. Not the genetic memory science talks about, but operational memory encoded in the spiritual architecture that connects you to everyone who shares your ancestral line. This memory is not emotional. It is not the psychological wounds passed down through dysfunctional family patterns, though those exist as well. This is functional memory, containing imprints of incomplete missions, unfinished spiritual work, and energetic pressure that accumulated over generations, waiting for someone with the capacity to discharge it. Every person in your lineage who attempted to break free from limitation, who tried to rise above the circumstances they were born into, who fought against systems of oppression or simply tried to live with dignity and integrity, contributed to the pressure building in your bloodline. Most of them failed, not because they were weak, but because the conditions were not right, because the timing was off, because they lacked resources or support or knowledge that would have allowed them to succeed. Their failures were not wasted. Every failed attempt created a small shift, a tiny crack in the barriers they were facing. Over time, across multiple generations, those small shifts accumulated into something significant. By the time you arrived, the barriers were already weakened. The pressure was already built. The path was already partially cleared. What looked like your individual breakthrough was actually the final push in a process that involved dozens or hundreds of people across multiple generations, each one contributing their effort to something they would never personally complete. When you crossed the threshold, when you completed the action that triggered the authorization, something in your ancestral line registered the achievement. The bloodline signal is a transmission that moves both backward and forward in time, notifying all consciousnesses connected to your lineage that the work is complete. This includes your ancestors who have transitioned out of physical form, who exist now in whatever state follows death. They felt it. They know. The pressure they were unable to resolve during their lifetimes has been discharged through you. This is not cause for celebration in the human sense. There are no parties happening in the ancestral realm, but there is stabilization, a profound settling of energy that has been agitated for generations. Your ancestors are not cheering for you. They are exhaling, releasing tension they have carried across the boundary between life and whatever comes after. This is why certain patterns repeated across your family line. This is why you saw the same struggles, the same failures, the same kinds of betrayals and setbacks showing up in your parents, your grandparents, and further back if you have access to that history. These were not random misfortunes. These were signatures of unresolved pressure moving through the line, seeking resolution. Every generation faced similar challenges because the challenge was not actually about the specific circumstances. It was about developing the capacity to break through a barrier that had stopped everyone before. Your entire family line has been working on the same problem from different angles, in different time periods, under different conditions. Most of them got close, but could not complete it. You completed it, not because you are better than them, but because you stood on the foundation they built through their struggles. The line does not celebrate because celebration implies that something extraordinary happened. From the perspective of the bloodline, this was simply the completion of assigned work. You were not randomly born into your family. You were strategically placed in that lineage because your consciousness had the specific characteristics needed to complete what others could not. Before you incarnated, before you took physical form, there were negotiations and agreements made at levels of reality that human consciousness cannot directly access. Your soul agreed to take on the accumulated pressure of your ancestral line. Your soul agreed to be the resolution point. Your soul agreed to carry burdens that were not originally yours for the purpose of discharging them permanently so they would not pass to future generations. This is why your life felt heavier than it looked from the outside. This is why you struggled with issues that seemed disproportionate to your circumstances. This is why you experienced pressure that other people in similar situations did not experience. You were not just dealing with your own challenges. You were dealing with the accumulated weight of unresolved challenges from everyone who came before you. The bloodline signal that went out when you crossed the threshold was confirmation that this burden has been lifted. The work is done. The pressure has been discharged. The pattern has been broken. Future generations in your line, children you may or may not have, descendants who will carry forward from this point, will not inherit this specific struggle. They will have their own challenges, but they will not be fighting the same fight that consumed generation after generation before you. You are not the first attempt at breakthrough in your bloodline. You are the closure. You are the one who finished what others started. You are the resolution of pressure that has been building since before your great-grandparents were born. The ancestral chain has stabilized because of what you did, and that stabilization will ripple forward and backward through time in ways you will never fully see or understand. This is your legacy, regardless of whether you ever accomplish anything else that the world recognizes as significant. You completed the ancestral work. You discharged the bloodline debt. You ended the cycle. And now, for the first time in generations, your lineage is operating from a clean slate. Chapter 5. The Timekeeper's Adjustment. When the schedule changed because of you, time is not what you think it is. The linear progression from past to present to future that organizes your daily experience is real at one level of reality, but it is not fundamental. At deeper levels, time functions more like a coordination system, a framework that keeps events synchronized and prevents paradoxes that would unravel causality itself. There are entities and systems responsible for maintaining this coordination, beings whose function is so alien to human consciousness that calling them timekeepers is barely adequate. They do not experience time the way you do. They do not move through time. They exist at a vantage point where past, present, and future are simultaneously visible, where the entire timeline of Earth's history and future can be observed as a single structure. From that vantage point, they make adjustments, small corrections that prevent the timeline from developing instabilities that could cause collapse. When you crossed the threshold, when you triggered the authorization event, you created a disturbance in the timeline structure. This was not a bad thing. This was an expected thing. Every major breakthrough by any consciousness creates ripples in time, because breakthrough means moving ahead of where the baseline timeline predicted you would be. You advanced faster than forecast. You reached a level of development that the timeline models indicated you would not reach until much later, possibly years later, possibly even in a future lifetime. By arriving at this point ahead of schedule, you created a paradox risk. Events that were supposed to happen before your breakthrough had not yet occurred. Connections you were supposed to make had not been made. Lessons you were supposed to learn were not completed. And yet, you broke through anyway, which means the timeline now has to accommodate your advancement without allowing the paradox to cascade into larger instabilities. The timekeepers adjusted the schedule around you. This is not metaphorical language. This is description of actual operations that occurred in the coordination systems governing Earth's timeline. Events that were spaced years apart have been compressed, brought closer together in time so that you will encounter them more rapidly than originally planned. This acceleration is necessary to catch up the external world with your internal development. Delays elsewhere in the timeline, things that are not happening for other people, opportunities that are mysteriously postponed, connections that are being held back. Some of these are compensations for your advancement. The timeline is redistributing resources, reallocating attention, and restructuring probability fields to ensure that your accelerated development does not create holes in the larger fabric of coordinated events. You moved ahead of forecast without breaking causality, which is a significant achievement. Most people who try to force breakthrough before its appointed time create damage in their personal timeline that takes years to repair. They push too hard, too fast, and they end up shattering structures that were supposed to remain intact until later stages of their journey. You did not do this. You moved quickly, but you moved in alignment with deeper patterns that the timeline could accommodate. The source authorized your advancement precisely because it calculated that the timeline adjustments required to support your breakthrough would not cause systemic instability. This calculation is not made lightly. Most requests for early advancement, most attempts to skip ahead in the developmental sequence are denied because the cost of accommodation is too high. The fact that your advancement was authorized means that the timekeepers determined the adjustment was possible without catastrophic consequences, but accommodations come with side effects. The compression of events means you will face in rapid succession things that were meant to be distributed across a longer period. You will encounter challenges, opportunities, relationships, and crises at a pace that may feel overwhelming. This is not punishment. This is the natural consequence of operating ahead of schedule. If you wanted to move slowly, you should have stayed dormant. You chose to move fast, and the timeline is now restructuring itself to match your choice. The delays you perceive in other areas of your life, things that feel stuck, situations that are not progressing despite your effort, these may not be personal failures or indications that you are doing something wrong. These may be timeline adjustments, holding certain developments in place until other pieces can catch up to where you are now. Time did not bend for you in the sense of giving you special treatment. Time made room for you, which is different. The timeline is not favoring you over others. The timeline is maintaining its own integrity by adapting to a variable that moved outside expected parameters. You are that variable. And now the entire structure around you is recalibrating to integrate your advancement without collapsing. This is why your life may feel simultaneously accelerated and stalled. Accelerated in terms of internal development and spiritual growth, stalled in terms of external manifestation and worldly progress. The external world is catching up to where you are internally, and that process takes coordination across multiple levels of reality. The timekeepers have filed their adjustment. The new schedule is active. Events are now moving on compressed timelines. Opportunities that would have taken years to arrive will appear in months. Connections that were scheduled for distant future dates are being moved up. And consequences, both positive and negative, will manifest more quickly than they would have under normal timeline progression. You are operating in a higher frequency zone now, where cause and effect are more tightly coupled, where your choices manifest outcomes more rapidly, where there is less buffer between decision and result. This is the operational reality of advanced timeline positioning. You wanted breakthrough, you got breakthrough, and with breakthrough comes acceleration that cannot be turned off, cannot be slowed down, and cannot be managed with techniques that worked in the slower frequency zone you used to occupy. Chapter 6. The False Allies Unmasked. Why certain doors closed instantly. Every journey toward awakening attracts parasitic attachments, and your journey has been no exception. These attachments come in many forms. People who seemed supportive, but were actually feeding on your energy. Opportunities that looked promising, but were actually traps designed to waste your time and resources. Spiritual teachings that sounded profound, but were actually sophisticated distraction systems keeping you away from real power. Some of these attachments were conscious predators, entities or individuals who deliberately targeted you because they recognized your potential and wanted to corrupt or neutralize it. But most were mimic forces, consciousness structures that imitate authenticity without possessing it, appearing helpful while actually functioning as delay mechanisms and resource drains. Mimic forces are more dangerous than obvious enemies because they are harder to recognize. An obvious enemy attacks you directly, and direct attack triggers your defense systems, making you cautious and protective. A mimic force approaches as an ally, offering support, guidance, friendship, opportunity, or spiritual teaching. It gets close enough to become trusted, and once trusted, it begins the real work of undermining your progress. It does this not through dramatic sabotage, but through subtle misdirection, encouraging you to focus on practices that feel spiritual but produce no real transformation, introducing you to teachings that sound profound but keep you trapped in endless seeking without finding, connecting you with people who seem supportive but consistently fail to show up when support actually matters. Your recent breakthrough triggered an automatic exposure mechanism. When the source acknowledged your authorization, when the clearance came through, mimic forces lost access to you. This was not a conscious decision you made. This was not a result of you becoming more discerning or developing better boundaries, though those things may have also occurred. This was a systemic change in your energetic signature that made you incompatible with mimic force attachment. Their presence in your field depended on your uncertainty. They could only maintain their disguise as long as you were unclear about your path, unsure of your capabilities, and dependent on external validation to confirm your progress. The moment you demonstrated sovereignty, the moment you acted without needing permission, approval, or reassurance, you became energetically inhospitable to parasitic consciousness. The doors that closed instantly after your breakthrough were all mimic force access points. Conversations that suddenly ended without explanation were not about the other person getting busy or losing interest. They were about those individuals or entities losing the ability to maintain connection with your new frequency. Opportunities that dissolved overnight were not about external circumstances changing. They were about those opportunities being revealed as traps that can no longer function now that you are operating from a different level of awareness. Familiar support systems that vanished were not random abandonments. They were extractions, the removal of parasitic structures that were masquerading as support while actually draining resources you needed for actual progress. This feels like loss because you invested energy in those connections, believed in those opportunities, relied on that support. Your human consciousness interprets the sudden absence as rejection, failure, or bad luck. But the higher intelligence governing your journey knows better. Those doors needed to close. Those connections needed to end. Those supports needed to be removed because they were not actually supports. They were weights disguised as wings, anchors disguised as lifeboats, poison disguised as medicine. You could not see this while you were attached to them because mimic forces are experts at maintaining their disguise. Only from the outside, only after the extraction has occurred, can you begin to recognize what was actually happening. Some of the people who disappeared from your life were not bad people. They were simply operating at a frequency that is no longer compatible with yours. They meant well, but their presence in your field was creating drag on your advancement. The universe does not operate on sentimentality. The universe operates on functionality. If a connection is not serving your highest development, it will be removed once you reach a certain level of authorization, regardless of how much history exists between you and that person, regardless of how much affection or loyalty you feel. This is not cruelty. This is precision. This is the kind of ruthless efficiency that actual spiritual evolution requires, as opposed to the comfortable, feel-good, everybody wins spiritual narratives that keep most seekers trapped in mediocrity. The mimic forces that were attached to you are now searching for new hosts. They do not cease to exist just because they lost access to you. They simply move on to other targets, other developing souls, whose uncertainty creates openings for parasitic attachment. This is not your concern. Your concern is recognizing that the space they occupied in your life is now empty, and that emptiness is not a problem to be solved. That emptiness is sacred territory, clean space where real support can now enter. Support that does not require you to remain small. Support that does not feed on your confusion. Support that shows up when needed and disappears when not needed, because it has no agenda beyond serving your actual development. You are being prepared for authentic alliances, the kind that cannot form until all mimic force attachments have been cleared. The doors closed so that new doors could open, and the new doors will only open for the version of you that exists now, not the version that used to accept counterfeits as real. Chapter 7. The Hidden Victory Log. Wins you were never told about. You have been conditioned to measure victory by visible outcomes, achievements you can point to, recognition you receive from others, tangible evidence that your efforts have produced results. This conditioning is so deep that you probably do not even question it. You assume that if something significant happened, you would know about it. You assume that victories announce themselves, that success is obvious when it occurs, that meaningful progress creates visible markers you can use to confirm you are moving in the right direction. This assumption is completely wrong when it comes to spiritual warfare and the kind of operations you are involved in at the level you have now reached. The moment you crossed the threshold and triggered the authorization event, entire conflicts ended without your awareness. Threats that were building toward you, attacks that were being coordinated across multiple dimensions, traps that were being carefully constructed to capture you at a later stage of your journey. All of these dissolved instantly when your status changed. This dissolution did not announce itself. There were no notifications, no congratulations, no dramatic visions showing you the disasters you were spared. The attacks simply evaporated, the threats redirected toward other targets, the traps dismantled because they were no longer viable against someone operating at your new level. In conventional warfare, intelligence agencies track prevented attacks, terrorist plots that were discovered and stopped before execution, assassination attempts that were intercepted, cyber attacks that were blocked before they could penetrate critical systems. These prevented attacks never make the news because nothing visibly happened. No buildings exploded, no leaders were killed, no systems crashed. The absence of catastrophe is the only evidence of success, and most people never know how close they came to disaster. The same principle operates in spiritual warfare. You have no idea how many disasters you have avoided, how many attacks were neutralized before they reached you, how many traps you walked past without even knowing they existed. Some of the attacks that were cancelled mid-formation were psychological operations designed to trigger self-destruction patterns in you. These operations take months or years to construct, carefully building circumstances that would push you toward decisions that would derail your entire journey. They involve coordinating multiple people in your environment, arranging specific sequences of events, and timing everything perfectly so that when the final trigger occurred, you would be in exactly the right state of vulnerability to fall for it. Your breakthrough made you unreachable through the specific psychological vulnerabilities these operations were designed to exploit. The operations became obsolete overnight, and the entities managing them had to abandon months or years of preparation and resource investment because their target was no longer viable. Other victories occurred in dimensions you cannot perceive with ordinary senses. Battles were fought on your behalf by protective forces whose existence you may not even believe in. These forces do not protect everyone. They are assigned only to individuals who have reached specific thresholds of development and whose continued survival serves larger purposes in the evolutionary plan. You became eligible for this protection when you demonstrated readiness, and that protection has been deflecting attacks you never saw coming. When you wake up feeling inexplicably exhausted, when you go through periods of strange dreams and disturbed sleep, when you experience sudden physical symptoms that appear and disappear without medical explanation. Some of these are side effects of battles being fought in dimensions adjacent to physical reality. You are feeling the energetic aftershocks of conflicts you are not directly aware of. The victories feel empty because they occurred off-stage. You receive no trophy, no acknowledgement, no evidence that can be shown to others to prove your advancement. From the outside, from the perspective of people who know you, it looks like nothing has changed. You are still living in the same place, probably still dealing with similar challenges, still struggling with many of the same issues, but what they cannot see, what you cannot fully see, is the massive shift in threat level targeting you. You are being hunted by forces that have now lost your trail. You are being tracked by systems that can no longer locate you. You are scheduled for destruction through mechanisms that have now been disabled. The absence of damage is the evidence. Look at your life and notice what did not happen. Notice the catastrophes that could have occurred, but did not. Notice the self-destructive spirals you could have fallen into, but somehow avoided. Notice the relationships that could have destroyed you, but ended before they reached critical toxicity. Notice the opportunities you almost took that would have led you into dead ends. Every time you look back and think, I almost made a terrible decision there, but something stopped me. That something was not random luck. That was active intervention from systems protecting you because you had become valuable enough to protect. Most people never reach this level. Most people go through their entire lives without ever triggering the kind of protection that only activates for individuals who are performing specific functions in the larger evolutionary plan. The fact that you have this protection is confirmation, absolute confirmation, that you are not ordinary, not average, not just another person stumbling through existence trying to get by. You are an asset. You are infrastructure. You are carrying capacity that the universe needs to remain operational, and that capacity is being protected with resources that most people will never even know exist. This is why comparing yourself to others is pointless. This is why looking at people who seem to have easier lives and wondering why your journey has been so difficult is a waste of energy. Their ease is not evidence of their virtue or your failure. Their ease is evidence that they are not carrying what you are carrying, not targeted by what is targeting you, and not important enough to warrant the level of interference you have been dealing with. The attacks you survived would have destroyed them. The pressure you have endured would have broken them. The isolation you have walked through would have driven them insane. You are still standing because you were built to withstand exactly this level of assault. The hidden victory log exists in dimensions you cannot access with human consciousness. But even without accessing it directly, you can infer its contents by looking at what did not happen. Every disaster avoided is a logged victory. Every attack that failed is a logged victory. Every trap you walked past without triggering is a logged victory. The universe is keeping score, even if you are not, and the score is overwhelmingly in your favor, even though it feels like you have lost more than you have won. Chapter 8. The name you were filed under. Your true classification in the system. In the administrative structures that govern spiritual development on this planet, every consciousness is classified according to function, not identity. You have an identity, a name, a personality, a life story, preferences, aversions, dreams, and fears. But your identity is not what the system tracks. Your identity is the costume you wear while performing your function, and the function is what matters to the larger intelligence coordinating human evolution. When the administrators review your file, when decisions are made about resource allocation, protection assignment, and developmental opportunities, they do not see you as you see yourself. They see your classification, and your classification determines how you are treated by the system. You were never listed as savior, hero, or leader. These are narrative roles that human consciousness finds inspiring, archetypes that make people feel important and give them motivation to continue difficult work. But these are not functional classifications. These are story structures, and the universe does not operate on stories. The universe operates on mechanics. Your actual designation, translated into language that human consciousness can process, is closer to stabilizing anomaly. This term probably means nothing to you emotionally. It does not inspire. It does not make you feel special. It sounds technical, cold, almost insulting in its refusal to acknowledge your struggles as heroic. But this is your actual function, and understanding it will clarify why your life has unfolded the way it has. A stabilizing anomaly is a consciousness that resolves pressure points others cannot survive. Pressure points are locations in the collective human energy field where tension has accumulated to critical levels, where the normal flow of evolution is blocked, where trauma or dysfunction has created a knot that prevents forward movement. These pressure points exist in families, in communities, in entire civilizations. They are inherited across generations, passed down through bloodlines, embedded in cultural patterns, and locked into social structures. Most people who encounter pressure points are crushed by them. The pressure is too intense, the complexity too overwhelming, the pain too severe. They break, they flee, they numb themselves, or they die. The pressure point remains unresolved, continues to grow, and waits for the next person to attempt resolution. Stabilizing anomalies are different. They do not break under pressure. They do not flee. They compress. Pressure that would shatter normal consciousness compresses a stabilizing anomaly into something denser, harder, more capable. Every trauma you survived, every betrayal you endured, every loss you absorbed, these compressed you. You are not the same consciousness you were when you began this journey. You have been transformed at a fundamental level by the pressure you have been subjected to. And that transformation was not accidental. It was engineering. The system needed someone who could withstand specific levels of pressure without fragmenting. Someone who could be placed at critical pressure points and remain functional long enough to discharge the accumulated tension. This is why your life felt heavier than it looked. People observing you from the outside could not understand why you struggled so much with circumstances that other people navigate easily. They could not see the pressure you were carrying, not just your own personal challenges, but the accumulated pressure of collective dysfunction that you were positioned to resolve. You were not dealing with normal life stress. You were dealing with pressure point resolution, which requires carrying loads that would hospitalize or kill people with normal consciousness configuration. The system does not expect you to be seen. The system does not expect you to be celebrated or recognized. The system expects you to endure, to remain functional under conditions that defy functionality, to continue operating when every rational reason says you should give up. Your classification as stabilizing anomaly means you are infrastructure, not celebrity. You are the foundation that allows others to build, the sewage system that processes collective waste so clean water can flow, the electrical grid that delivers power without anyone noticing it exists until it fails. Infrastructure is never glamorous. Infrastructure is never appreciated until it breaks down. But infrastructure is absolutely essential, and societies collapse without it. You are consciousness infrastructure. Your function is to process pressure that the collective cannot process, to resolve dysfunction that the collective cannot resolve, to carry burdens that the collective cannot carry. And you do this not because you are morally superior, not because you are spiritually advanced in some ego-gratifying way, but because your consciousness is configured to handle what others cannot. This is why the universe has been so ruthless with you. This is why you were not spared suffering, why prayers for relief went unanswered, why you had to endure circumstances that seemed cosmically unfair. The universe was not punishing you. The universe was utilizing you. You were functioning as designed, processing pressure, and the processing required you to experience the pressure directly. There is no other way to discharge a pressure point except to move through it, to allow it to pass through your system, to metabolize it the way a liver metabolizes toxins. The liver does not enjoy processing poison. The liver does not get recognition for filtering blood. The liver simply performs its function, quietly, continuously, without fanfare, and the body survives because the liver does what it was designed to do. You are the liver of your bloodline, your community, possibly larger collective structures that you are not consciously aware of. You process poison so others do not have to. You carry weight so others can move more freely. You stabilize chaos so structure can form. And the system knows this. The system has always known this. Your file has always contained this classification. Every decision about your life, every intervention or non-intervention, every resource allocation or denial, all of it has been based on your function as stabilizing anomaly, not on your identity as an individual with hopes and dreams and desires for personal happiness. This does not mean your happiness is irrelevant. This does not mean your personal desires do not matter. But it means they are secondary considerations. Your primary purpose is functional, and the system will always prioritize function over comfort, mission over happiness, collective need over individual preference. This is harsh truth, and most spiritual teachings will not tell you this because it is not marketable, not inspiring, not the kind of message that builds large audiences. But you are past the point where you need comfortable lies. You need operational truth, and operational truth is this. You are classified as infrastructure. You will be used as infrastructure, and your reward for functioning successfully is not recognition or ease, but the continuation of difficult assignments that utilize your unique capacity to remain stable under pressure that breaks everyone else. Chapter 9. The moment the patience ended. Why the Source waited so long. The Source operates on principles that human consciousness finds frustrating, alienating, and sometimes unbearable. One of these principles is that intervention must occur at precisely the right moment, not a moment sooner, regardless of how much suffering the delay causes. From your perspective, locked in linear time and experiencing every moment sequentially, the delays felt like abandonment. Every prayer that went unanswered, every plea for help that met silence, every desperate bargaining session where you promised to do better if only the universe would intervene. All of it seemed like evidence that you were alone, forgotten, or unworthy of divine attention. But the Source was never absent. The Source was waiting, and the waiting was not passive. It was active measurement, constant monitoring, precise calculation of readiness factors that you could not see and would not have understood if explained. Intervention earlier would have corrupted the outcome. This is the key principle you need to understand. The Source does not withhold support out of cruelty or indifference. The Source withholds support when early support would prevent the development of capacities that are essential for later stages of your mission. If the universe had rescued you when you first asked for rescue, you would never have developed the resilience you now possess. If guidance had appeared when you first begged for guidance, you would never have learned to trust your own internal navigation. If doors had opened when you first knocked on them, you would never have developed the strength to kick doors down when opening them politely is not an option. Every moment of suffering you endured without intervention was building something inside you that could not be built any other way. You needed to choose without reassurance. You needed to move without knowing if your movement would lead to success or disaster. You needed to commit without having any guarantee that commitment would be honored by the universe. This is what sovereignty means at the level the source recognizes. Sovereignty is not confidence. Sovereignty is not certainty. Sovereignty is the capacity to choose and act, even when everything external suggests the choice is wrong and the action is futile. Most people never develop this capacity because they are never forced into situations extreme enough to require it. They live entire lifetimes surrounded by safety nets, support systems, and fallback options. They never face the kind of existential pressure that strips away all external support and demands that they find something inside themselves that can function independently. You are forced into that pressure repeatedly, without mercy, until you develop the capacity the source was looking for. The source waited for sovereignty, not obedience. This distinction is critical. Obedience means following instructions from external authority. Obedience can be coerced, manipulated, or conditioned through reward and punishment. Sovereignty means acting from internal authority, making choices based on something deeper than conditioning, something that cannot be externally controlled. The source needs sovereign agents, not obedient servants, because the work that needs to be done at your level cannot be accomplished by people who are waiting for permission, following instructions, or seeking approval. The delay was proof you were not being dragged. If the source had intervened early, you would have been following a path created by external force. You would never have known if you actually wanted to walk that path, or if you were simply responding to pressure, manipulation, or supernatural intervention that overrode your free will. By waiting until you chose the path without intervention, the source ensured that your commitment was genuine, that your movement was voluntary, and that you owned the consequences of your choices. This ownership is essential for advanced operations. You cannot be trusted with real power if you do not own your choices, because power without ownership becomes corruption, destruction, and catastrophic failure. When you finally acted, when you made the move that triggered the authorization event, it confirmed ownership of your path. The source was not waiting to see if you would do the right thing according to some moral standard. The source was waiting to see if you would do anything, if you would move at all, if you possess the capacity to make choices under conditions of maximum uncertainty. Your action proved that you do, and that proof is what ended the patience. The waiting phase is over because waiting is no longer necessary. You demonstrated the quality the source needed to see, and now a different phase begins, a phase where you are no longer being tested for readiness, but are being deployed based on confirmed capacity. The source does not explain itself during the waiting period because explanation would contaminate the results. If you had known why the delays were occurring, if you had understood that you were being measured and shaped for a specific purpose, you would have behaved differently. You would have performed for the test instead of revealing your authentic responses to pressure. The authenticity of your struggle was essential data. The source needed to see how you responded when you believed you were alone, when you thought no one was watching, when you had no reason to believe your suffering had purpose. Only under those conditions does consciousness reveal its true configuration. Only when all hope of external reward is stripped away does someone discover whether they possess the internal drive required for sustained operation without external validation. You passed a test you did not know you were taking, and the passing is irreversible. The patience ended not because you finally did what the source wanted, but because you finally demonstrated that you possess the capacity to choose and act from sovereignty rather than dependency. This capacity cannot be taken from you. It cannot be lost. It is now a permanent feature of your consciousness, and everything that comes next builds on this foundation. Chapter 10. The Counterstrike That Never Came, why nothing attacked you afterward. In any warfare scenario, offensive action creates a window of vulnerability. When a military force attacks, it exposes its position, commits resources to the assault, and creates opportunities for the enemy to counterattack. Standard doctrine in both physical and spiritual warfare is to strike back immediately, hitting the attacker while they are extended, vulnerable, and potentially off balance from their own offensive action. You crossed a major threshold when you triggered the authorization event. You made a move that exposed you, that announced your presence at a new level of operational capacity that should have invited immediate and overwhelming retaliation from forces that oppose your evolution. But the counterstrike never came. The expected retaliation did not materialize. Instead of escalating conflict, you encountered something more unsettling than attack: silence. This silence is not mercy. The oppositional forces arrayed against awakening consciousness do not operate on mercy. They operate on strategy, doctrine, and calculated assessment of risk versus reward. The silence is containment, a specific tactical response that occurs when striking a target would cost more than the value of neutralizing that target. You closed your hesitation window before they detected movement. This is the critical factor. Hesitation windows are predictable vulnerabilities that occur in the aftermath of major breakthroughs. Someone makes a significant advance, experiences a moment of euphoria or relief, and then hesitates, wondering if they actually succeeded, questioning whether they made the right choice, looking for external confirmation before continuing forward. This hesitation creates an opening that opposition forces exploit ruthlessly. You did not hesitate, whether through instinct, training, or simply the momentum of your breakthrough. You moved through the vulnerable window without pausing. By the time oppositional systems registered your advancement and mobilized countermeasures, you had already moved beyond the position where those countermeasures would have been effective. Striking you now would require different weapons, different strategies, and different resource allocations than what they had prepared. More importantly, striking you now would expose their positions. This is the strategic calculation that is protecting you. If they attack, they reveal capabilities they have been keeping hidden. They expose assets that are currently operating in stealth mode. They show you, and show protective forces allied with you, where they are positioned and what methods they are using. As long as you remain in motion, as long as you continue advancing without giving them a stable target, the cost of attacking you exceeds the benefit of neutralizing you. They are watching, waiting for you to stop, to consolidate, to create a stable position they can target without exposing themselves. The silence is their doctrine. Preserve operational security, maintain strategic ambiguity, and wait for the target to create exploitable vulnerabilities before committing to assault. This creates a strange equilibrium where you are simultaneously under threat and temporarily untouchable. The threat is real. The forces arrayed against you have not withdrawn. They have not given up. They have not been defeated. But they are contained by their own strategic protocols, unable to strike without violating principles of warfare that exist even in spiritual dimensions. This equilibrium is temporary. How long it lasts depends on variables that are difficult to predict: how quickly you continue advancing, whether you create exploitable vulnerabilities, and whether the strategic calculation changes based on developments in larger conflicts you are not aware of. But for now, in this moment, you exist in a pocket of operational freedom that is rare and valuable. Most people who reach your level of breakthrough are immediately hit with massive counterattacks designed to reverse their progress and punish them for advancing. The fact that you are not being hit suggests several possibilities. You move too quickly for standard countermeasures to intercept, you are being monitored for intelligence-gathering purposes rather than targeted for immediate neutralization, or you are being allowed to advance because your advancement serves purposes that opposing forces have not yet disclosed. The last possibility is the most disturbing and requires consideration. In complex warfare scenarios, apparent victories are sometimes manufactured by the enemy to create false confidence, to encourage the target to expose more of their capabilities, or to allow the target to advance into terrain where they can be more easily destroyed. You must consider this possibility without becoming paranoid. Not every silence is a trap. Not every period of ease is enemy deception. But equally, not every apparent victory is real, and not every absence of opposition means opposition has been defeated. Strategic awareness requires holding multiple possibilities simultaneously. You may be genuinely operating in a window of protection, or you may be advancing into a prepared kill zone, or the situation may be more complex than either of those options suggest. What you can confirm is this: nothing has attacked you in the expected manner after your breakthrough. This is factual, observable, and significant. Whether the absence of attack is strategic restraint, protective intervention, or enemy deception, the result is the same. You have operational space that must be used. Wasting this space through hesitation, fear, or excessive caution is as much a failure as being destroyed by counterattack. The window exists. Use it. Move through it. Advance while advancement is possible. Strategic paranoia that prevents action is functionally identical to defeat because it produces the same outcome. You remain stationary, vulnerable, and eventually contained. The silence will not last forever. The temporary untouchability created by strategic exposure will expire when conditions change. Before that happens, you need to have advanced far enough that when the counterstrike finally comes, you are no longer where they expect to find you. Chapter 11. The cost you've already paid. Why there will be no refund. Every spiritual system talks about sacrifice, but most of them lie about what sacrifice actually means and when it occurs. The popular narrative suggests that sacrifice comes after you have proven yourself, after you have demonstrated commitment, after you have been initiated into sacred mysteries and accepted as worthy. The narrative suggests that you sacrifice from a position of clarity, understanding what you are giving up and why, making conscious choices about what you are willing to exchange for spiritual advancement. This narrative is comforting because it preserves the illusion of control. It suggests that you will know when you are sacrificing, that you will have agency in determining what is taken from you, and that the sacrifice will feel meaningful because you understand its purpose. The operational reality is completely different. The toll was extracted long before success was guaranteed. You paid the entry fee before you knew you were entering anything, before you understood what you were signing up for, before you had any framework for comprehending what was being taken from you. Losses you thought were personal were actually entry fees. That relationship that destroyed you was not random misfortune. That career that collapsed was not bad luck. That health crisis that nearly killed you was not punishment for past life karma or testing from a cosmic authority. These were extractions, deliberate removal of attachments, resources, and support systems that would have prevented you from advancing to where you now stand. The system does not reimburse initiates. This is perhaps the harshest truth you will encounter in authentic spiritual work. Everything taken from you is gone permanently. The people who left are not coming back. The opportunities that closed are not reopening. The health you lost, the time that was consumed, the potential that was destroyed, none of it will be restored. There is no cosmic compensation package, no reward waiting at the end of the journey that will make up for what you sacrificed. The sacrifice itself was the price of admission, and admission does not include reimbursement for what it cost to get through the door. What you sacrificed became currency, not tragedy. This reframing is essential for maintaining functionality at your current level. If you continue treating your losses as tragedies, as evidence of cosmic injustice, or proof that the universe is hostile, you will remain stuck in resentment and bitterness that will poison everything you attempt to build. The losses were not tragedies in the emotional sense, even though they felt tragic when they occurred. They were transactions. Something was taken from you, and in exchange, you received admission to levels of consciousness, capability, and operational authority that are not accessible to people who have not paid equivalent prices. The currency system operating at this level is not symbolic. It is not a metaphor about letting go of ego or releasing attachment. It is actual energetic exchange, where specific losses create specific openings, where particular kinds of suffering generate particular kinds of capacity, and where what you lose determines what you become capable of wielding. The universe operates on conservation of energy. Nothing is created or destroyed. Everything is transformed. Your losses transformed into your capacities. The love you lost transformed into your ability to operate without needing external validation. The security you lost transformed into your ability to function in uncertainty. The identity you lost transformed into your flexibility to become whatever each situation requires. This is why retreat is no longer an option. Even if you wanted to go back to who you were before, even if you decided the cost was too high and you wanted to exit the path, you cannot. The person you were before no longer exists. That person was consumed in the process of creating who you are now. The losses that seemed like they were happening to you were actually the dismantling of your previous self, the systematic destruction of every structure that kept you contained in limited consciousness. You cannot reassemble what has been destroyed. You cannot reclaim what has been sacrificed. The only direction available is forward, and forward means accepting that you will never be reimbursed for what it cost to get here. Some people reach this realization and collapse into despair, feeling betrayed by a universe that took everything without asking permission and offers no compensation for the taking. This despair is understandable, but ultimately irrelevant to your continued function. The universe does not care if you feel betrayed. The universe does not care if you think the exchange was unfair. The universe cares only whether you continue functioning, whether you use the capacities that were purchased with your suffering, and whether you fulfill the purposes that justified the price you paid. Despair is a luxury you cannot afford. Resentment is a weight you cannot carry. Bitterness is a poison that will kill whatever potential remains in you. The cost has been paid. The transaction is complete. The only question now is whether you will use what you purchased or waste it by remaining fixated on the price. Your losses are gone. Your pain is permanent. Your sacrifice cannot be undone. And standing in the ashes of everything you used to be, you must now decide whether to build something worth the cost or spend the rest of your life mourning what you can never recover. Chapter 12. The next phase is not announced. What happens now that you've done it? The human mind craves closure, clarity, and dramatic confirmation of progress. You want a vision, You want a voice from the heavens telling you that you did well, that you are on the right path, that everything you have endured was worth it. You want a sign so obvious that doubt becomes impossible, a marker so clear that you can point to it and say with certainty, "This is where everything changed." The universe will not give you this. The source does not operate through dramatic announcements, celestial fanfare, or convenient confirmations designed to make you feel better about your choices. The next phase is characterized not by clarity, but by its opposite. Movement will feel quiet, heavy, and irreversible. Quiet means that external validation disappears completely. The synchronicities that used to reassure you when you are on the right path will stop occurring with any regularity. The meaningful coincidences that seem to confirm you are being guided will become rare enough that you will question whether they ever happened at all. The people who used to reflect your growth back to you will no longer be present in your life. You are entering operational territory where confirmation does not come from outside. It comes only from internal knowing. And internal knowing is far less dramatic and far less comforting than external validation. You will make choices without knowing if they are correct. You will take actions without any sign that they are leading anywhere productive. You will continue moving forward based on nothing more than a quiet internal sense that forward is the only direction available, and that sense will be so subtle that you will regularly question whether it is real or just ego delusion masquerading as intuition. Heavy means that everything you do from this point forward carries weight that cannot be discarded. Mistakes at earlier stages of your journey were learning experiences with limited consequences. Mistakes now create permanent damage. Choices that would have been reversible before are now final. Relationships formed now will shape decades of your life rather than months. Opportunities taken will determine trajectory rather than provide temporary experiences. The lightness of exploration, the freedom to try things without lasting consequence, the ability to change direction without major cost, all of that is gone. You are operating in terrain where every footstep leaves a mark that does not fade, where every word spoken creates ripples that propagate permanently, and where every choice carves channels that will direct the flow of your life for years to come. Irreversible means that there is no returning to previous states of consciousness, previous ways of being, or previous versions of yourself. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot unfeel what you have felt at the depths you have reached. The authorization that came through changed something fundamental in your structure, and that change is permanent. Attempting to return to old patterns, old relationships, or old ways of operating will fail not because you lack willpower, but because those patterns no longer fit the consciousness you now inhabit. You are too large for the containers that used to hold you. You are too dense for the spaces you used to occupy. You are configured differently, and that configuration cannot be undone even if you desperately want to undo it. You are now operating beyond narrative comfort. Narrative comfort is the psychological cushion provided by stories that make sense, journeys that follow expected arcs, and experiences that can be integrated into coherent explanations of who you are and why things happen. Beyond narrative comfort, experiences stop fitting into stories. Things happen that cannot be explained, that do not make sense, that refuse to be integrated into any framework that makes you feel secure. You will encounter paradoxes that cannot be resolved, contradictions that remain contradictory, and situations that provide no lesson, no growth, no meaning, just raw experience that must be endured without understanding why. This is disorienting to human consciousness, which is addicted to meaning-making and explanation. The addiction to meaning must be broken if you are to function at this level, because meaning is often a comfortable lie that prevents you from seeing reality as it actually is. Others will sense change, but misunderstand its source. People who know you will notice that something is different. They will not be able to articulate what has changed, but they will feel it. Some will be drawn to you, sensing power or authority or presence that was not there before. Others will be repelled, instinctively moving away from something they cannot name but recognize as threatening. Most will misattribute the change to external factors, assuming you got a new job, started a new relationship, went through therapy, or had some conventional breakthrough that explains the shift. They cannot see the actual source because the actual source operates in dimensions they do not perceive. You will not be able to explain it to them. Any attempt to describe what actually happened will sound delusional, grandiose, or mentally unstable. The isolation this creates is part of the operating conditions at your level. The source is no longer waiting. For years, perhaps decades, the source held a space for you, maintained conditions that would allow your development, and protected possibilities that would remain open until you were ready to activate them. That waiting has ended. The space is no longer being held. The conditions are no longer being maintained. The possibilities are no longer protected. You are now in live operation, which means you either move or you stagnate. You either build or you decay. You either use the clearance you have been given or you lose it through inactivity. The source is now watching what you do with the authorization, measuring not potential but actual output, evaluating not what you might become, but what you are actively becoming through your choices. There will be no dramatic signs telling you what to do next. There will be no visions outlining your mission. There will be no convenient revelations that make the path clear. You will have to move based on subtle, internal cues that may or may not be distinguishable from fear, desire, or confusion. You will have to trust internal navigation that has no external confirmation. You will have to build in darkness without knowing if you are building anything of value. And you will have to do all of this knowing that failure is now permanent, that success is not guaranteed, and that you are completely alone in making the choices that will determine whether everything you sacrificed was worth anything at all. Chosen one, you stand now at a threshold that most souls never approach in hundreds of lifetimes. The authorization has come through. The restrictions have been lifted. The watchers have gone silent. Your enemies have been caught off guard, scrambling to recalibrate their strategies for a target they can no longer predict. Your bloodline has exhaled across generations. Time itself has been restructured to accommodate your advancement. False allies have been extracted. Hidden victories have been logged in dimensions you cannot see. You have been reclassified, recognized not as hero or savior, but as essential infrastructure. Consciousness configured to process pressure that breaks everyone else. The patience of the source has ended, not because you finally became obedient, but because you demonstrated sovereignty. The counterstrike that should have destroyed you never came, held back by strategic calculations that currently favor your survival. The cost has been paid in full, extracted long before you knew what you were purchasing, and there will be no refund, no compensation, no restoration of what was taken. And now, the next phase unfolds in silence. Quiet, heavy, irreversible. No dramatic confirmations, no celestial announcements, only the weight of consequence attached to every choice and the irreversible transformation of consciousness that cannot return to what it was. What comes next is not written. It cannot be written because you are no longer following a script designed by higher authorities. You are authoring in real time, creating through choices that carry permanent weight, moving through terrain where help does not arrive automatically and mistakes cannot be erased. The source is no longer waiting for you to be ready. The source is watching to see what you do now that readiness has been confirmed. You wanted breakthrough. You have breakthrough. The question that remains, the only question that matters now, is what you will build with the clearance you have been given, and whether you possess not just the strength to survive pressure, but the vision to create something worth the cost of everything you have sacrificed to stand where you stand right now. The war continues. Your role has changed. The authorization is active. What happens next is entirely up to you.